This is my brother. I called them to help. He's like, please tell your brother to raise his hands. They're gonna kill him. They will kill him now. They're gonna kill him.
You can't wait for a person to pull a gun if you believe that they have one.
Say his name! Alfred Olango! Tonight in El Cajon, a police shooting. The death of Alfred Olango. KPBS Evening Edition starts now.
Sharma inside our KPBS News studios.
And I'm Ebone Monet outside of the El Cajon City Hall. Tonight marks 1 year since the police shooting death of Alfred Olango. That killing sparked days and nights of protest and questions about police-community relations. Questions communities across the nation are still struggling to answer. Tonight, we reflect on lessons learned. We'll hear from Olango's family. We'll also hear from community activists and a San Diego group that's working with police to help officers better respond to people experiencing a mental crisis. That's all coming up in just a few minutes. Amitha?
Thank you, Ebony. San Diego's battle against hepatitis A has reached some of the beach communities. City crews began power bleaching the sidewalks today in Pacific Beach, Ocean Beach, and the Midway area. A line of work trucks lugging tanks of bleach rolled down slowly Garnett Avenue, while workers dressed in white hazmat suits walked with hoses to disinfect the busy tourist walkways. Sidewalk bleaching will begin in Uptown and Mid-City on Friday. The cleaning has been identified as a key action in helping to eliminate the virus, which has killed 17 people. SDG&E is again pressing California regulators to allow it to bill customers for costs related to the 2007 wildfires. This a month after two judges issued a decision saying SDG&E should not be allowed to charge ratepayers $379 million in expenses. The state inquiry found the company's own lines ignited the fires because they did not properly design, build, and maintain their equipment. Governor Jerry Brown has signed a bill that allows law enforcement agencies not to release body camera footage depicting rape victims. The measure permits withholding video and audio recordings of both sexual and domestic violence when a victim's face, voice, or intimate body part is depicted. Governor Brown wants California to pack a bigger punch in the next presidential race. He signed legislation today allowing residents to vote 3 months earlier. This will give the state more sway in nominating candidates for the general election. In the last race, residents voted after President Trump and Hillary Clinton had already clinched their party's nomination. The change also pushes California's primaries for state offices to March. The White House reportedly wants to lower the cap on the number of refugees allowed in the U.S. Members of Congress will be consulted before the figure becomes official. However, that conversation will not include all 5 congressional members from San Diego, which is a top site for resettlement. Only Republican Darrell Issa sits on a committee that is required to be informed. There's a high-risk fire for some cities along the coast as winds speed up and things stay dry. Erin Calandra has more in tonight's forecast.
It's looking pretty nice around here. Taking a look at our radar and satellite, nothing going on. We don't have any kind of precipitation, no rain, just nice, clear, sunny skies. Tonight, 64 degrees, partly cloudy conditions. Taking a look at Oceanside tonight, 54, Ramona, 56, Alpine, 57, Borrego Springs, 66 degrees. We do have a high fire risk here right along the coast. That's because of some gusty winds and very dry conditions. Certainly could be some bad news for any kind of wildfire. Tomorrow, Oceanside 83, Poway and Ramona coming in at 93, Alpine 91, and Mount Laguna nice and cool, 72 degrees. Along the coast, it's going to be pretty nice. We're still above average until the weekend, then we drop down to the 70s, still a few degrees above average. Inland, plenty of sunshine, dropping down to the 80s by Saturday. In the mountains, we're in the 70s, beautiful conditions there. And in the deserts, it is still hot, double digits though, in the upper 90s for our highs. For KPBS News, News, I'm Erin Calandra.
It's quiet out here outside of City Hall today, but 1 year ago, this was one of the sites for the mini protest. People rallying against the police shooting death of a 38-year-old refugee. The death of Alfred Olango struck a chord with communities across San Diego. KPBS's Maureen Cavanaugh explains.
On September 27, 2016, Lucy Olango called police saying her brother wasn't acting like himself. She asked for psychological assistance. Licensed mental health clinicians who work with police were not available to respond, but police officers found Olango about an hour later in a taco shop parking lot. Officer Richard Gonzalez shot Olango 4 times after Olango pulled an object out of his pants pocket and gestured toward officers. It was an electronic cigarette. Police initially did not release the video, showing only a still image of Olango in what they called a shooting stance. But the next day, El Cajon Mayor Bill Wells described what he saw on the tape.
I saw a man who was distraught, a man who was acting in ways that looked like he was in great pain. And I saw him get gunned down and killed, and it broke my heart.
It's time! It's time! To get organized! Get organized! For a natural revolution! For a natural revolution!
Protests began Tuesday, the day Olango was killed, and continued throughout the week. At first, they were largely peaceful, but by Thursday, there were eruptions of violence. Police used pepper spray balls to break up protesters blocking intersections. Some protesters threw bottles at police. The unrest prompted law enforcement to release the video the next day. District Attorney Bonnie Dumanis eventually cleared Officer Gonzalez in January, ruling the shooting was justified. I'm Maureen Cavanaugh, KPBS News.
It was Alfred Olango's sister who called El Cajon police to say her brother was having a mental crisis in the minutes before he was shot and killed by an officer. Lucy Olango has since sued the police department, alleging negligence. I spoke to her this month at her lawyer's office about her brother's death. Take me back to that day, September 27th, 2016, when your brother Alfred Olango was shot and killed by an El Cajon police officer. He had shown up at your place hours earlier. How was he behaving? What was his mental state?
He was telling me that he's so scared. I'm like, why are you scared? It's like, I think people are following me. I'm like, which people are following you? There's nobody here in my house. I opened the door. I'm like, look, there's nobody here.
What did you think was happening to him?
When I saw Alfred that time, and when he was sitting and sweating profusely, he was going into crisis. He had a mental breakdown, completely mental breakdown. And when I called for these people to come and help, he was still in the house. We were staying, we're all in the house, me and him.
You called police at that time?
Yeah, when he was sweating profusely, I did call police. I called, the number, like, hey, my brother is not doing so well. I need somebody to come and help him. I waited and waited. I was cooking too and stuff. He was still in the house. I waited. Nobody called. I'm like, what is going on? So I got dressed even, in my scrubs because I was going to go to work. And when I was getting dressed and stuff, he walked out of the house. And I didn't know where he had gone.
He leaves your apartment. You drive to work. What did you see?
I go to my car, driving, and I see him walking, crossing the street.
What did you see?
He was looking like as if somebody is following him or somebody's after him. He's like looking around like somebody, somebody who is scared. And I called him, Alfred, stop, don't walk like that. He's walking fast, and I'm walking with him, talking to him, come, let's go back home, come, let's go back. It's not safe out here.
You called El Cajon police again, but what happened?
He gets out with the gun and pointing at him. Put your hands up. Put your hands up. How are you going to come and start pointing somebody who is having a mental breakdown that cannot process to put their hands up? So there was an African-American lady already at the side, and when I came, and then he's like, please, do you know this man? I'm like, this is my brother. I called him to help. He's like, please tell your brother to raise his hands. They're going to kill him. They will kill him now. They're going to kill him. I was pleading with him. Please just raise your hands up, but I felt like they shouldn't even point him with a gun, and I told them he wasn't armed.
Again, you told a dispatcher and police when they arrived at the scene that your brother was unarmed. Former District Attorney Bonnie Dumanis concluded that police were justified when they shot and killed your brother. In fact, Dumanis said that the way that your brother removed an object from his pocket and raised his hands made it seem as if he was trying to let the officer know that he was about to get shot. How does that conclusion compare with what you saw?
Who wants to be killed? If he wanted to die, he could have killed himself. He wanted to live. He was crying for help. He was walking, crossing the street back and forth. He was crying for help.
So Dumanis also said that Olango had cocaine and alcohol in his system at the time of the shooting. Do you think that that influenced his behavior?
It probably could have, but he was going through things. He had just lost his best friend like a day or two before.
So as you know, there's been great debate, great tension in this country over police shootings of African Americans. Does the shooting of your brother fall into that conversation?
Yes. What about if it was a white man standing there? Would they have reacted differently? Probably.
It's been 1 year since your brother's death. How are you coping?
It has been a journey. I've been through valleys, mountains, through the valleys. It's been tough and very difficult. Knowing that he's not going to be coming, being cheerful and joyful, like, hey, sis, I'm here. What's going on? I miss you. I love you.
Lucy Olango, thank you very much for speaking with me today.
I do appreciate your time talking to me.
Say his name. Alfred Olango! Rest in peace, Alfred.
San Diego City has a horrible citizens review board. A horrible citizens review board.
Today, Olango's family, friends, and community groups rallied outside El Cajon City Hall, demanding a citizens review board for police practices for El Cajon. KPBS News has reached out to El Cajon Mayor Bill Wells and El Cajon Police Chief Jeff Davis about tonight's coverage. They declined interviews. We did speak to Brian Pendleton with the San Diego Black Police Officers Association. We wanted to know, what would he do as an officer in the Olango situation?
If I recall correctly, the gentleman is walking up to the officer, kind of agitated. I believe he had his hand in his pocket. I couldn't hear the audio or if the officer was telling him to take his hands out of his pocket. But in a situation like that where you have a situation that's rapidly unfolding, the person is not obeying your commands, and you have nowhere to go, at least in my mind, you have nowhere to go, and you believe that this person is posing a threat to you, you can't wait for a person to pull a gun if you believe that they have one, because by the time they pull it and pull the trigger, I mean, you can't negotiate anymore. There's no place for you to go. So, I felt, at least in that situation, as I looked at it, I thought, man, I would hate to be in that officer situation, because I probably would have done the same thing. How
do you keep personal biases from interfering with quality policing?
You just got to tell yourself, I mean, you're there to do the right thing. I mean, certainly, I think the majority of cops, police officers, are trying to do their job correctly all the time, but we all have biases. I have them myself. So it's hard not to look at a situation or someone and not reflect on a past experience. I mean, that we're human. That's what happens. But when you let those biases take over, all common sense and all reasoning, you're lumping this person, and you're thinking that, this is the same as everybody else, and then that's a problem. You just gotta, you have to find a way to look past those biases to do your job correctly.
Thank you so much.
Mm-hmm. You're welcome.
Increasingly, police are finding themselves on the front line responding to people dealing with a mental crisis. KPBS reporter Susan Murphy spoke with a local group working with police departments to teach officers how to communicate with someone experiencing a mental breakdown. And we want to warn you, this next piece includes actual recordings from a police shooting that some viewers may find disturbing.
How you doing, sir? How are you? My name's Officer Burton.
In a role-playing scenario, a knife-wielding man in a tree is acting threatening and mentally unstable. Police officer Reuben Burton Jr. tries to calm him.
Hey, so tell me, what's going on, brother?
Burton works to keep a safe distance and de-escalate the situation so he can call for psychiatric assistance.
Hey, bro, just drop the knife. Come on.
But the man doesn't respond. He jumps from the tree and lunges at Officer Burton with the knife. Burton's partner shoots the man, who falls to the ground.
Suspect is down.
Fortunately, on this day, there's no bullet wound. Nobody dies.
If you think it's appropriate, request the PERT unit.
Burton and dozens of other newly graduated San Diego police officers are training.
Are we going to tase him out of the tree? No. Okay. Are we going to beanbag him out of the tree? No.
For interactions with people suffering from a mental crisis. Across the county, that number is staggering.
Since 2009, San Diego County law enforcement, these calls coming into dispatch of a psychiatric nature have increased 92%. San Diego Police Department in the last year alone was roughly 110%.
Mark Marvin oversees the training.
But we're also looking at how you're introducing yourself to the subject.
He's director of San Diego County Psychiatric Emergency Response Team, or PERT. The nonprofit works with every law enforcement agency in the county, helping officers develop communication skills to help them defuse potentially deadly situations.
The more he's going to vent, the more he's discharging energy.
PERT also employs 51 licensed mental health clinicians who pair up daily with law enforcement officers. They spend their entire shift on patrol.
When a 911 call comes in to dispatch, the dispatcher can look at who's out in the field and can basically dispatch a PERT team to that scene when that person is in the midst of a psychiatric crisis.
The need for crisis teams has drawn renewed attention across the nation in recent years following several high-profile police shootings of people experiencing a mental crisis.
And somebody didn't go home that day. That's Mr. Olango.
Nationwide, a quarter of all people shot by police were impacted by mental illness. In San Diego County, 62 fatal police shootings have occurred since 2010.
We are on the sideline in a lot of these scenarios, hoping for an opportunity to be able to engage that person. For our clinician to interact with the person in crisis, there has to be a guarantee of public safety.
Marvin's team of clinicians has more than doubled in the last 2 years, but it still falls far short of meeting its skyrocketing demand.
Last fiscal year, we responded to just about 8,000 of these calls in San Diego County. Meanwhile, recognize that's about 1/4 of all these calls coming into dispatch because we're not 24/7.
Say his name! Alfred Olango! Say his name! Alfred Olango!
One missed call was for Alfred Olango in El Cajon. The PERT team had been responding to a different call.
Unfortunately, I know some people almost believe that it's as if we come in from the sky wearing capes, and it doesn't work that way, And maybe in some of the movies, there's always a great outcome and the piano music is playing in the background. I wish that were the case.
PERT clinicians are assigned to the most needed areas, including the San Diego Police Department's Central Division in and around downtown. It's where hundreds of homeless people live on the streets.
But also the other tragedy is there are so many people who are homeless living with severe mental illness. But we know no bounds. We go into the wealthiest communities as well as those most impoverished.
You started getting some clients from me?
PERT hired an additional 10 clinicians since last year and trained more than 1,000 officers and deputies in its 1 to 3 day academies.
It's trust. It's building a collaborative relationship and realizing, unfortunately, with mental illness, we're in this for the long term.
Susan Murphy, KPBS News.
Earlier today, we spoke to State Assemblywoman Dr. Shirley Weber. She wrote AB 953, which was signed into law by Governor Jerry Brown. It mandates that law enforcement collect data about traffic stops, including demographics. And she tells me this is one step in the right direction towards combating racial bias in policing.
We've got a problem in terms of African American males, and it's ongoing. And anyone who's a mother of an African American male is concerned and should be very concerned every time the child leaves home.
1 year ago, Wilnisha Sutton was already a San Diego activist. So she says when she found out about the police shooting death of Alfred Olango, she felt compelled to come here to El Cajon. And once she got here, she documented everything she found on her cell phone.
Oh my God. Tuesday, September 27th, 2016.
Oh my God.
Wilnisha Sutton jumped out of her car in downtown El Cajon and started recording.
God. Jesus Christ.
She got to the Broadway Village strip mall minutes after police shot 38-year-old Alfred Olango. Olango's sister was one of the first people Sutton saw.
Man, I call you guys to come and help my brother, not to come and shoot him in front of me. Okay.
Using her cell phone, Sutton started recording accounts of witnesses.
And then I saw him go pow, 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 5 shots.
So
and next thing you know, I got closer and I saw the young man on the floor. He was dead.
Nothing.
I felt compelled, like I have to report live what's going on. I don't want to wait for the news and the media to come up with their own narrative. I'm going to go and give the people the truth.
In fact, truth is the moniker Sutton uses when performing. The 30-year-old San Diegan is a singer, mother, and proud activist.
Activism to me means to be free and vocal about what you believe in and to stand up for those that don't have a voice.
You saw what happened, bro?
1 year ago, Sutton says she was in that parking lot to stand up for Olango, a man she didn't know. It didn't take long for others to join her.
When I got there, it probably was like 10 people there. An hour later, it was like 100.
The crowd moved to outside the El Cajon Police Department, not knowing at the time if Olango had survived.
No justice! No peace! No justice! No peace!
Medical personnel pronounced Olango dead at the hospital, and by Wednesday, the gathering had swelled.
Revolution, nothing less!
A lot of the people that lived in that area were more so spectators and not really getting involved in the movement, but it didn't matter. It was just amazing to see people out there and to see the people that did come out there, because it was people from every color, every religion, and it was the most beautiful thing I've ever been a part of.
The assembly turned into demonstrations, at times spilling into the streets.
No justice, no peace, no racist police.
Sutton soon found herself leading the call.
Say his name!
Alfred Olango!
Say his name!
Alfred Olango!
By Thursday night, law enforcement took a stronger stance.
I think the third night is the night they tear gassed us and pepper sprayed us and shot pepper bullets at us.
El Cajon police said demonstrators blocked traffic, broke windows, and assaulted officers. Police arrested 5 protesters.
My mom was scared. My siblings would call me every night like, you need to go home. I'm like, I'm not going home.
Why are you shooting at this man?
That's just me. If I'm in something, I'm in it full-fledged.
Y'all sworn in to serve and protect.
By Friday, September 30th, El Cajon Police Chief Jeff Davis called a press conference.
This is Mr. Olango.
To announce county law enforcement unanimously agreed to break protocol and release the footage of the shooting.
That was the intention of releasing this video. We really emphasize our desire for peace and calm.
A people united will never be defeated.
In the days that followed, the protests spread.
No justice, no peace, no racist police.
That Saturday, demonstrators marched downtown to San Diego Police Headquarters.
Don't shoot! Don't shoot!
By Sunday, Truth was back in El Cajon. She captured this cell phone recording. Law enforcement surrounded the parking lot memorial, near where Olango was killed days before. They wore helmets and were armed with batons. Authorities had declared it an unlawful gathering. Police arrested 14 people, most who they say refused to disperse.
I felt betrayed, like I felt hurt, and I felt very discouraged at the state of the way the police came out.
Still, Sutton returned to El Cajon night after night, even as the crowd shrank and the news cameras went away.
It was discouraging. It was very discouraging.
The remaining resistors dubbed the parking lot Olango Village, where Sutton says she stayed for 50-plus trying days.
I lost myself in that. I was very depressed afterwards, very. Whew, it made me emotional even talking about it.
A year later, there's no sign of Olango Village or any indication of what happened there.
If you want to stand right here, you can stand right here.
Monisha Truth Sutton says she's still not satisfied with the explanation for the shooting offered by police, but says the day she spent in El Cajon made her more aware, more loving, and more prepared to fight for communities of color.
You can't just kill people and expect for us not to stand up for our rights.
And you can find tonight's stories on our website, kpbs.org/evening edition. Thank you for joining us and have a great evening.